The pen felt heavier than it should have. My fingers trembled slightly as I scrawled my signature across the final page of the closing documents. One stroke after another, I was sealing a chapter of my life that had taken 10 years to write. I had just bought my first house. It wasn't a mansion, not even a place anyone would call fancy, but to me it was everything. I pressed the folder to my chest as I stepped out of the realtor's office, the late afternoon sun painting gold across the concrete sidewalk. This wasn't just a house. It was proof. Proof that I was capable, that I had built something real, without shortcuts, without help, without Derek. I slipped into the driver's seat of my old Corolla, still buzzing with pride. Before I could turn the key, my phone rang. I didn't even check the screen. I just smiled. A part of me, foolish and hopeful, imagined it was my mom. Maybe she had felt something, some maternal pull from the universe, telling her this was a big day. Maybe, just maybe, she was calling to say, "I'm proud of you, Jenna." "Hey, Mom," I answered, voice light. She didn't even say hello. "So," she began, "you're putting the house in Derek's name, right?" I blinked, the smile still frozen on my face. "What?" It just makes sense," she continued, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "He's the man of the family. If anything ever happens, he should be the one listed as the owner. You're not married yet. It's just smart." My chest tightened. The joy drained from my body like someone had pulled the plug. My fingers curled around the steering wheel, knuckles whitening, but I said nothing. She wasn't joking. I waited for the punchline, the laugh, the inevitable. Just teasing, "Honey, congratulations." But it didn't come. "I bought this house for me," I finally said, each word like dragging a stone uphill. She scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. He's your brother. He'll take care of it. Girls come and go, Jenna. But Derek, he's family." I didn't respond. I couldn't. This wasn't the first time she'd said something like that. But this time, something inside me cracked. I ended the call without another word. No yelling. No begging. Just silence. I sat in my car for what felt like an hour, the afternoon sun creeping across the windshield. I looked down at the folder in my lap, the papers that bore my name, my effort, my fight. And I remembered every damn thing I had done to get here, working nights through college, turning down vacations, eating dollar ramen in a moldy one-bedroom apartment while Derek dropped out of 2 programs and played video games at home. He was still living at home, still sleeping in the bigger bedroom, still being handed everything while I scraped for every inch. And yet they still thought he deserved more. I glanced up at the rearview mirror. My eyes were red. My lips trembled. But I wasn't broken. Not this time. I took a deep breath, slowly, then whispered to no one but myself, "I'm done." This house would not carry his name. It would carry mine. Because I needed just one thing in this world that they couldn't steal with their twisted version of loyalty. I didn't buy it out of spite, but I would keep it out of survival. And for once in my life, I wouldn't apologize for wanting something that was truly mine. The air inside my apartment was stale, heavy with the scent of cardboard boxes and half-packed dreams. I had started moving out slowly, box by box, never telling anyone. Not my parents, not even Amanda, my best friend since middle school. The place was small, barely 600 square feet. A mismatched couch, a cracked coffee table I'd found on Craigslist, and a mattress on the floor. But it was mine. Every rent check, every broken faucet, I fixed myself. They were my silent trophies. That night, I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed my mother's voice on loop. "He's the man of the house. Girls come and go." The words gnawed at my bones. I wasn't even angry, not yet. I was just hollow. I reached into an old file box labeled college junk and pulled out a worn notebook. Inside were pages I had filled during the years when I felt invisible. Scribbled dreams, doodles, budget plans, quotes I'd clung to when I couldn't afford groceries and had to choose between gas money or ramen. My eyes landed on one sentence I had written during my junior year, on a night I was working late and missed my own birthday. "One day, I'll build something no one can take from me. My throat tightened. They always told me I was strong, that I was the one who would figure it out. They didn't mean it as a compliment. It was their way of saying, "You don't need us, so we won't show up." I remembered winter when I was 14. I had begged to join the school choir trip to Nashville. It was $200. Mom said no, money was tight. That same week, Derek got tickets to a Charlotte Hornets game, courtside, a jersey, and brand new Nikes to match. I didn't complain. I smiled. I said it's okay. I stayed home and watched the trip photos go up on social media. Everyone laughing, singing, making memories I was never allowed to have. These weren't isolated incidents. They were layers, thin, sharp, and endless, stacked on top of each other until I could no longer tell where the surface was. And now, even when I had done something monumental, something my parents should have celebrated, they saw it only as another asset to shift into Derek's hands. They didn't ask how I'd pulled it off, how I'd spent 5 years building a freelance design business from the ground up, how I had lived off instant oatmeal and dollar store coffee so I could save for a down payment, how I had spent 3 Christmases alone so I could take on extra projects during the holiday rush. None of that mattered, because I wasn't their chosen one. I was their backup, the extra, the girl who did okay but never made it. Because no matter what I did, I wasn't Derek. I felt the tears rising, hot and stubborn. I didn't want to cry, not over them, but I let them come, quietly, not because I was weak, but because the weight of pretending to be okay had finally tipped. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the blinds and a pit in my stomach. I had to see the house again, my house. I drove across town in silence, parked in the narrow driveway, and unlocked the front door for the first time as an owner. The rooms echoed. No furniture yet, just hardwood floors, a dusty scent of fresh paint, and a single lamp in the corner. I walked from room to room, like I was searching for something, maybe proof that this was real. And it was. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty counter, and whispered again, mine. Not Derek's, not my parents', mine. But I knew peace wouldn't last, not with a family like mine. They had a way of turning even the purest victories into battlegrounds. They would poke, question, guilt trip, and pressure me, because the idea of me keeping something for myself, something big, was a threat to their version of order. Still, in that moment, in that quiet, sun-drenched kitchen, I felt something else blooming alongside the fear. Resolve. I didn't know exactly what would come next, but I knew one thing I wouldn't fold. Not this time. The smell of charcoal and overcooked ribs hung heavy in the air, mingling with the familiar drone of family chatter. I hadn't planned on going. I had stared at the invitation for days, debating whether it was worth the emotional landmine. But some part of me, the loyal daughter part that hadn't fully died yet, still wanted to show up, still believed that maybe, somehow, things could feel normal for once. They didn't. The moment I stepped into the backyard, plastic plate in hand, I was hit with a flurry of questions before I even reached the cooler. Jenna, still in that shoebox apartment of yours? Any plans to settle down? Your mom says you've been busy with work, freelancing, right? So you're still doing that online stuff. I smiled politely, bit my tongue, nodded, let it all roll off me like cheap wine on polyester. No one asked how I was doing. Not really. No one asked what I was building. They just assumed I was still waiting for life to happen. While Derek, standing near the grill in designer shades and a smug grin, soaked up compliments for a new project Dad was investing in, whatever that meant. As always, Derek didn't explain what the project was. He never needed to. Just being Derek was enough. I found a corner seat under the faded patio umbrella and quietly chewed my food, letting the noise of the party swirl around me like fog. I didn't say a word about the house, not because I was ashamed, but because I wasn't ready to watch them reduce it to a checklist item for Derek's future. But moms always notice. After dessert, She cornered me in the kitchen, her voice casual but loaded. "You've been quiet today. Hiding something." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for 1 second, against all reason, I hoped she'd surprise me. I hoped she'd reach across the invisible divide and finally say the words I'd chased my whole life. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "I bought a house." Her face didn't soften. It sharpened. "Really?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Where?" I gave her the neighborhood, watched her mentally calculate the price range, the status implications, the resale value. She nodded slowly. "That's nice." Then came the question. "So, when are you transferring it to Derek's name?" It hit me like a slap. I stared at her, stunned, the sound of party laughter muffled behind the kitchen door. "Mom, no." "Why would I?" She raised her brow like I was being childish. "You know it makes sense. He'll settle down soon. Start a family. You're not even sure you'll stay in Raleigh. He's the man. This is just logic." It wasn't logic. It was the script. The same one I'd heard since I was old enough to understand favoritism, but too young to name it. Derek was the man of the house. Derek needed space. Derek had potential. And me? I was the responsible one, the one who would understand. The invisible cushion they could stand on. I didn't answer her. I walked out of the kitchen, my feet moving on instinct, and headed straight for the front lawn. I didn't say goodbye, didn't wave. I just left. But of course, word travels fast. By Monday morning, Derek called. "Mom told me you bought a house. Congrats." His tone was syrupy, too sweet to be real. "She said you're putting it under my name." "That's smart. Good thinking." I could barely contain the disbelief tightening in my chest. "No, Derek, I'm not." He laughed like I'd told a joke. "Don't be like that. You know Mom's right. Smart taxes, inheritance planning, future security." "Future mine," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. "This is the first thing I've ever done just for me." Silence. Then a sudden shift in his tone. Cold. Defensive. "You've always been selfish. You act like you're some oppressed saint when you've had every opportunity. But fine, Jenna. Keep your little house. Just don't come crying when you screw it all up." He hung up. And just like that, I knew something irreversible had broken. That night, I sat on the bare wooden floor of my living room, wrapped in an old throw blanket, staring at the empty space where a couch might go someday. No Derek. No parents. No expectations pressing down on my lungs. Just me. The echo of his voice still rang in my ears. But so did my own. "This is mine, and I would protect it with everything I had." The calls didn't stop. First my mother, then my father, then my aunt, who hadn't spoken to me in over a year, suddenly remembered my number. Each one came laced with a different flavor of pressure, some sugar-coated with concern, others steeped in guilt or passive-aggressive jabs. But they all carried the same message beneath the surface. Give Derek the house. I stopped answering by day 3. Instead, I shifted focus. If they were going to come after what I built, I had to protect it like war was coming. Because with my family, it always was. That Friday, I took a half day off client work and drove straight to the Wake County Records office. I walked in with every document I owned, purchase contract, deed, insurance paperwork, notarized identification, and requested to officially lock down the title. My name, my terms, no co-owners, no backdoors. I even had Amanda's husband, who happened to be a real estate attorney, review every clause, just in case. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I bought a fireproof safe, installed it in the back of my new walk-in closet. Every paper that proved this house was mine went in it. No room for misunderstandings. No space for family logic. Afterward, I drove to my storage unit and pulled out a dusty plastic bin marked Jenna College. I hadn't opened it since I was 23. Inside was a collection of who I used to be. Rejection letters, unpaid internship mementos, faded notebooks filled with design sketches. But near the bottom, wrapped in tissue, I found a small manila envelope. On it, written in red Sharpie, Jenna's future. I sat on the floor of my half-unfurnished living room and opened it. Inside was a vision board I had made for a college assignment. Magazine clippings of wood accent kitchens, sunlit reading nooks, and backyard gardens. Pasted across the center in crooked letters were the words, "A home no one can take from me." I stared at that board for a long time. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from something rising in my chest that I hadn't let surface in years. Rage. Not loud, flailing rage. No, this was the quiet, molten kind. The kind that pools deep and steady. The kind that fuels action. That night, I opened every old journal I had. Years of entries. Some hopeful, some numb, some practically begging for love I never received. And in between the lines, I started seeing it. My entire life had been a study in diminishing. Every choice I made was about not rocking the boat, about being understanding, about stepping aside, and every single time it made them smaller, not bigger in their love for me, just more entitled to take. And now they wanted to take the last thing that still had me in it. No, this house was not just property. It was my line in the sand. The next morning, Amanda showed up unannounced with 2 lattes and a face that said she wasn't buying the "I'm fine" text I sent the night before. "Spill," she said, handing me the coffee. I told her everything. The call, the barbecue, the kitchen conversation, Derek's smug voice, the paperwork. By the end, her jaw was locked tight. "Jenna, they've been gaslighting you since birth. You finally have something that's yours, and they think they can just claim it." "I'm not giving it up," I said, softly but firmly. "Good," she said, reaching over and squeezing my hand, "because this time, you don't owe them a damn thing." That day, something shifted. I wasn't just defending anymore. I was preparing. I made a list of every favor, every sacrifice, every time I stepped back, so Derek could step forward. The family dinners where I wasn't asked about work, but he was toasted for doing the bare minimum. The birthdays I spent babysitting my cousins because Derek had plans. The years I covered groceries while he was figuring things out. I wrote them all down, not because I needed to keep score, but because I needed to remember. This wasn't just a battle over a deed. It was a reckoning, and I wasn't walking into it unarmed. The invitation came via group text. Family dinner, Thursday, 6 p.m., everyone brings something. It was signed with a heart emoji, and Mom's name like that made it sweet, but I knew better. This wasn't a dinner. It was a summons. Amanda told me not to go. "You don't owe them a performance," she said. "Let them wonder." But I wasn't going to let them write the story without me in the room this time. I didn't go to fight. I went to close the chapter. So that Thursday, I stood in front of my closet for 10 full minutes before picking my outfit. I chose a structured blazer, high-waisted slacks, clean lines, and neutral tones. The kind of look that didn't ask for approval, it owned it. I tied my hair back slick and low. No earrings, no jewelry, just the envelope. I drove to my parents' house without music, just silence and purpose. As I stepped through the front door, the usual noise hit me. Cutlery clinking, voices overlapping. Derek's laugh too loud from the living room. But something shifted the moment I walked in. The air got tighter, quieter. Derek glanced up and gave a half smile. "So, did you think about what we said?" He meant the house. Mom peeked out from the kitchen with that same look she always wore when I was 10 minutes late to dinner. Part worry, part judgment, all control. "I hope you've had time to reflect," she added, already bracing for my submission. I didn't sit down. I didn't even take off my coat. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and walked to the dining table. Everyone watched me like I was about to detonate something. And maybe I was. I placed the envelope down gently, then looked at them. "I've secured the deed to the house," I said. "Calm, clear, cold. It's final, legal, untouchable. Just wanted to share the good news. For a moment, it was like someone had muted the entire room. My father blinked. Derek's hand froze halfway to his glass. Mom's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no words came. There was no yelling, no pleas, no guilt-ridden monologue about family, just the sound of a truth they hadn't prepared for. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't wait for reaction. I turned, walked out the front door, and closed it behind me. The air outside was cool and quiet. The street lamp overhead flickered once. I exhaled slowly, then stepped off the porch without looking back. I wasn't their daughter tonight. I was a woman who had drawn her boundary in ink and dared them to cross it. And they hadn't. Not because they respected me, but because they were too stunned to stop me. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even pour a glass of wine like Amanda had told me to do after any family event longer than 15 minutes. I just sat on the floor of my kitchen, back against the cabinet, and stared at the blank wall across from me. The silence was different now. Not heavy, not lonely. Just still. This wasn't over. I knew that. My parents didn't let go of control easily, and Derek wasn't going to disappear. But for the first time in my life, I hadn't folded. I hadn't apologized. I hadn't explained. I had spoken in facts. In legal, irreversible facts. And that spoke louder than all the years I'd spent begging to be heard. I was done asking for recognition. Now, I was taking it. The call came just after dinner, while I was folding laundry in the living room. My phone buzzed on the counter, screen lighting up with one word that used to trigger 1,000 emotions all at once. Mom. I stared at it for a second too long. A part of me thought about letting it ring, letting her sit in that silence the way I'd sat in years of hers. But something in me was calmer now, stronger. I walked over and picked it up. Hello. There was a pause on the other end. Then her voice came, quieter than usual, fragile, like a woman, and used to the sound of her own humility. Jenna, we need to talk. I didn't say anything, just waited. She hesitated. I want to say I'm sorry. We never meant for things to get this way. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I had waited my whole life for those words. And now that I had them, they felt weightless, like paper promises after a house fire. Sorry. I repeated, my voice flat. Yes, she said, and I could hear her trying to sound genuine. We didn't mean to hurt you. It was just tradition. That's how your father was raised. It's how I was raised. Derek was always told that he deserved more, I interrupted, because he was the man of the house, because I was just the one who'd figure it out. There was silence. I kept going. You thought I'd break. You thought I'd bend like always. And when I didn't, when I locked that deed, when I walked out without begging for your love, that scared you, didn't it? Jenna, please. I'm not angry, I said. And I meant it. But I'm done. I'm done letting you guilt-trip me. I'm done pretending your version of fairness was anything but control. Her voice cracked. But it's family. No, I said, sharper now. Family is love, respect, support. What you and Dad did wasn't family. It was favoritism wrapped in excuses. She didn't respond. So I gave her what she wasn't expecting, the final nail. And just so we're clear, I added, I'm not putting Derek's name on the house. Ever. A sharp inhale on the other end. Then her voice, a whisper. You didn't mean that, right? I shook my head slowly, even though she couldn't see it. I meant every word. And then, because it felt like the truest thing I could say, I added, you didn't think I'd ever stand up to you. But I have. And now you have to live with it. Before she could answer, I ended the call. No dramatics. No screaming. Just a quiet, definitive click and peace. For the first time in years, I didn't cry after a conversation with my mother. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. 6 months passed like a slow exhale. In that time, I learned to live without waiting for the next apology. without checking my phone for their names, without measuring my success against the volume of their silence. The house had changed, too. Walls that once echoed now held the quiet hum of belonging. The living room smelled faintly of lavender and fresh paint. My bookshelf had grown. My porch had flowers. Every corner of that home was a sentence in the story I had finally reclaimed. Then came the invitation. It arrived in an ivory envelope with my name embossed on the front. An exclusive summit honoring independent entrepreneurs across the state. Someone had nominated me. I didn't know who. Maybe a client. Maybe Amanda. Maybe the universe deciding I'd earned something good. What I did know was I was going. I booked a hotel suite, ironed my best blazer, and drove the 2 hours to Charlotte with a quiet smile playing on my lips. This wasn't just another event. It was a room full of people who saw me, not for who I was born to please, but for what I had built with bare hands and sleepless nights. As I stepped into the grand ballroom of the Westin, the low lighting shimmered off polished marble floors. Laughter bubbled at cocktail tables. The smell of ambition mixed with perfume and champagne. I had just accepted a glass of sparkling water from a server when I saw them. My parents, sitting at a corner table near the back, talking quietly with an older couple I vaguely recognized from childhood events. My mother's eyes swept the room lazily until they landed on me. She froze. In that moment, something passed between us. Not anger, not pride. Just reckoning. A quiet acknowledgement that the girl they'd once dismissed had become someone neither of them could control or claim. I didn't walk over. I didn't wave. I turned away and stepped into a conversation with a woman who had just launched a chain of sustainable fashion pop-ups. She greeted me by name. Jenna Blake? I've seen your work. It's stunning. Not Derek's sister. Not Carl and Meredith's daughter. Just me. And for the first time in my life, that was more than enough. The night unfolded like a dream. When the awards portion of the event began, I didn't expect much. I was already glowing from the conversations, the connections, the sense of being wanted. But then I heard it. And now, honoring innovation in interior design and impact in small business development, our next award goes to Jenna Blake. Applause. A spotlight. I walked to the stage, heels clicking against the polished wood, hands steady as I accepted the plaque. From up there, the room looked soft and golden. Dozens of strangers, smiling, cheering, clapping. And in the back, my mother's eyes. Tears pooled there, not manipulation this time. Not control. Just realization. She knew. She finally knew. This was my life. My name. My win. And it had nothing to do with them. Later that evening, as the crowd began to thin and people exchanged last handshakes and business cards, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Derek. Congrats on everything, Jenna. I'm proud of you. I hope one day we can talk. I stared at it for a long moment. The boy who once told me I was selfish, who believed entitlement was his inheritance. And now he was looking up from below. I didn't respond. I slipped the phone into my bag, walked outside into the cool night air, and tilted my face toward the stars. I had arrived. Not because anyone let me, not because anyone handed me a key, but because I built the door, opened it, walked through it, and left it wide open for the next woman who was told she didn't matter. The parking lot was dimly lit, rows of cars casting long shadows under the glow of orange street lamps. The air smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass and engine heat. I walked slowly toward my car, the award plaque tucked under one arm, the night still clinging to me like warmth after a good fire. Then I saw him, Derek, leaning against his car a few rows over, hands in his pockets, posture unsure. He wasn't dressed like the golden boy tonight. No blazer, no cocky grin, just jeans, an old jacket, and a face I barely recognized. Jenna, he called out softly, can we talk? I stopped in my tracks. A year ago, I might have turned around. A year ago, I would have been afraid of confrontation, desperate for closure. ready to forgive just because someone asked nicely. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "What is it, Derek?" I asked, my voice calm, steady, not unkind but not open. He stepped closer. I wanted to apologize." That caught me off guard. He looked down at the pavement, then back up, eyes glassy but determined. "For how I treated you. For what I said about the house. For acting like it should have been mine. I was wrong." I didn't reply right away. I wanted to see if he meant it, or if this was just another attempt at positioning himself as the misunderstood brother. He kept going. "I guess I never realized how much you had to fight for. I just assumed it was easier for you because you didn't complain. But now I know." "You didn't want to know," I cut in. "Let's be honest." He flinched slightly but didn't argue. "I used to beg for your approval," I continued. "I thought if I just worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, gave up enough, maybe you'd see me. Maybe you'd respect me." I took a step closer now. "But I've learned something these past months. I don't need your approval, or Mom's, or anyone's, because I've built a life that's mine, and no one gets to rewrite that just because they've decided they're sorry." His eyes dropped to the ground. "Derek," I said, my voice now sharp with memory, "when you tried to claim my house, you didn't just try to take property. You tried to take identity. My fight. My name. My worth." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small white envelope. He looked confused. "This," I said, holding it out, "is the final bill." He hesitated, then took it, opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a typed breakdown, not of money, but of time, of years, of sacrifices, the babysitting, the skipped vacations, the debt, the ignored birthdays, every moment I gave so he could take. He read it in silence. "I told you," I said gently, "that I would make sure you understood what you tried to take from me." He looked up, pain flickering across his face. "I'm done, Derek. You can keep the envelope. Frame it. Burn it. Doesn't matter. It's not about guilt. It's about knowing. I see you now, for who you really were, and I've stopped trying to become small enough to fit beside you." I turned away. He didn't call after me, didn't follow. The only sound was the echo of my heels on the asphalt and the soft creak of my car door as I opened it. As I pulled away, I saw him still standing there, alone with the weight of something he never thought he'd have to carry. And for the first time, it wasn't mine to hold. The morning sun filtered gently through the kitchen window, casting golden streaks across the hardwood floor. Outside, the garden I had planted just weeks before swayed quietly in the breeze, lavender, rosemary, a few stubborn daisies refusing to bloom. I stepped onto the back porch barefoot, coffee in hand, wrapped in the oversized cardigan Amanda had gifted me after the housewarming. The air smelled like earth and new beginnings. I stood still, breathing it in. No emails, no calls, no one telling me what I should do or owe. Just quiet. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for the next attack. I wasn't preparing an explanation. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for someone to claim what I'd built. I was home, and I belonged to no one but myself. My phone buzzed on the table behind me. I glanced at it, half expecting another message from Derek or a guilt-drenched voicemail from my mother. But it was just a calendar notification. Personal time, 8 a.m., rest. Reflect. Reclaim. I smiled. I had started scheduling time for myself, not for productivity, not for performance, just to be, to exist without earning it, without proving anything. I sat on the porch step, the wood warm against my skin, and let the silence wrap around me. And then, against all odds, I answered the phone. "Hi, Mom," I said calmly. There was a beat of surprise on the other end. Then her voice, quiet, careful. "Hi, Jenna. I was just calling to check in." "I'm doing great," I replied. And I was. There was silence. She didn't know what to say. And for once, I didn't fill the gap for her. I let it exist. I let her sit in the emptiness between us, not as punishment, but as space. A space I had carved out for myself with every no I'd finally said. I think it's time we both start living our own lives, I added. Mine doesn't revolve around guilt anymore. Her breath caught. I see, and maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. But it didn't matter. I didn't need her to catch up anymore. I was done waiting. I ended the call gently. No drama. No final blow. Just a soft goodbye. I sat there long after the line went dead, sipping my coffee, watching the sunlight stretch slowly across my yard. The wind rustled the rosemary. A bee dipped toward a bloom, and I felt it. Peace. Not the peace you earn from winning. Not the hollow kind that comes from proving someone wrong. This was deeper. The kind that comes from choosing yourself. Over and over. Until no one else's voice is louder than your own. And in that stillness, I whispered one final truth into the morning air. They told me I was nothing next to him, but I became everything I needed without them. It happened on a Thursday, a quiet afternoon that smelled like damp earth and fresh rosemary. I was pruning the hydrangeas by the porch when I heard footsteps, measured, familiar, and decades too late. I looked up, and there they were, my parents, Raymond and Gwen Harper. I hadn't seen them in 21 years. Not since the night they pushed me out the door with a folded $20 bill and a single sentence. Figure it out yourself. And now here they stood. My father in a wool coat far too heavy for spring. My mother clutching her purse like she was about to sell something. Both older, of course. Smaller, as if the years had eaten parts of them. Their eyes searched mine, desperate to read a welcome. I offered none. Louisa, my mother said, her voice sticky with a sweetness I didn't buy. You look well. I said nothing. My pruning shears hung loosely in one hand. My father stepped forward. We didn't come to fight. We're just in a bit of a situation. Jasmine's tuition is due. It's a prestigious program in London. Law and global governance, very selective. I blinked. Jasmine. I echoed. You're here about her? She's your sister, my mother snapped. No, I said. She was your favorite. My mother's nostrils flared. She looked at the ground for half a second, then pulled something from her purse. A thermos. I thought it was coffee, maybe tea. But then, without a word, she flicked open the lid and hurled the entire contents at me. Cold water. Sharp. Smelling faintly of lemons and old plastic. It hit my face, my neck, my chest. I didn't flinch. I wiped it away slowly with the sleeve of my cardigan. The same gray cardigan I had worn when my youngest was born. The same one I wore the day Uncle Theo moved in with us for good. Is this your way of convincing me? I asked quietly. My mother looked stunned. My father reached for me, as if to pat my arm like I was still 12. I stepped back. I gave you everything we had left, he said. Now we're just asking for help. Jasmine needs. I don't care what she needs. The words came out before I could stop them. There was a moment, a silence so deep I could hear the wind shift in the trees behind the house. My mother looked at me like I had grown horns. My father's mouth hung open, but no sound came. 21 years ago, I continued, you made a choice. Jasmine was the golden child, the one worth investing in, the one worth loving out loud. You called me a burden, a failure, and you told me, and I quote, we only need one daughter. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I stepped aside from the doorway, but not to invite them in. I pointed to the gravel path leading back to the street. You chose Jasmine. Now live with that choice. My mother's lips trembled. How can you be so cold? I tilted my head. You raised me to be disposable. I learned from the best. She looked ready to speak again, but I closed the door. Not slammed, just closed. Quietly, deliberately, like ending a book I'd finished long ago. Inside, the house was warm. The kettle clicked off. My youngest daughter giggled from the living room where she was coloring. Theo! Uncle Theo! peeked around the kitchen door with an apron tied crookedly around his waist. "Was that—" "Yes," I said, wiping the last drop of lemon-scented water from my collarbone. "They came. And they left." He nodded, unsaid things passing between us like wind through old oak branches. I sat down at the table, next to the mug he'd poured for me. The steam rising from it felt like home. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. But deep down, somewhere between my ribs and my throat, something moved. Not guilt, not regret, just something. Maybe it was the memory of Jasmine's face when we were kids, pressed against my bedroom door, whispering, "Don't leave me alone with them." Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the first crack in a wall I didn't realize I'd built around myself. When I was 8, our house still smelled like fresh bread on Sundays and lemon wax on the floorboards. There was a grand old oak tree outside, its branches scratching against my window like it was whispering secrets only I could hear. Back then, the Harper home wasn't a place I feared. It was just home. We lived in Savannah, Georgia, a big, old Victorian house passed down from my grandparents, Margaret and Thomas Whitmore. They were the kind of people who made everything feel gentle. Grandma made jam from figs and wrote handwritten notes with each jar. Grandpa hummed jazz tunes while painting by the porch. When they were alive, the house had rhythm, and when they were gone, the silence took on a different tone. The accident happened 2 weeks after Jasmine's 3rd birthday. A truck ran a red light. Just like that, gone. No godbis. No slow fading. Just a call in the middle of the night and 2 cold beds that would never be slept in again. I remember the funeral. I wore a black dress with sleeves that itched my arms and shoes that were too tight. Jasmine sat on my lap the whole time, asking why no one was smiling. She didn't understand, but I did. At least I thought I did until I looked at my father's face. While my mother wept into a handkerchief and relatives whispered in pews, my father was smiling. Not a polite smile, not a nervous twitch, a real smile, one corner of his mouth lifted like he'd just closed a profitable deal. His eyes scanned the room as if he was already calculating who would inherit what. And when he noticed me staring, he winked. That moment never left me. It embedded itself in a place I didn't have words for yet. I remember clutching Jasmine tighter and whispering to no one, "Don't let him win." After the funeral, the house changed. No more Sunday bread, no more jazz, just a thin layer of dust settling over the piano keys. My mother, Gwen, sank into a quiet sort of bitterness. She cleaned obsessively, scrubbed tiles that weren't dirty, folded towels twice. She stopped hugging us, stopped looking me in the eyes. Meanwhile, my father took over everything. The finances, the kitchen schedule, the way we breathed. And Uncle Theo, our gentle, pale-skinned uncle with soft hands and a lingering cough, became his favorite target. Theo was my mother's younger brother. He had lived with us as long as I could remember. Frail from birth, never able to hold a full-time job, but he did odd things, freelance drawing, restoring old books, caring for Grandpa's garden. He moved quietly through the house like a shadow with warm eyes. When Grandpa was alive, my father never dared raise his voice at Theo. But now he unleashed it all. "You're a grown man and still freeloading," my father would bark across the dinner table. "Can't even mow the damn lawn." Theo would simply nod, say, "I'm sorry," then excuse himself to the garage, where he kept his sketch pads and worked in silence. I asked him once, "Why don't you say something back?" He smiled faintly and said, "Because I need the roof more than I need to be right." The first time I saw Theo cry was on the anniversary of Grandma's death. I found him in the laundry room, holding one of her aprons. It was yellow, with a daisy stitched on the pocket. He looked up, embarrassed, and wiped his face quickly. "I miss her too," I whispered. He pulled me into his arms. "She would have been so proud of you, Louisa, of your kindness." That night, I slept curled up on the floor beside his room. I didn't feel safe in mine. In those years, Jasmine was too young to understand much. But she was observant. She clung to me like a vine to a tree, following me everywhere, even when our parents weren't looking. She chose me, always me, until one day she didn't. It began subtly. "You know Jasmine's so clever," my mother would say, sipping her tea. "She reads so quickly. She must get it from me." My father chimed in louder. "No, she gets it from my side. My brother was a surgeon." "Not your daughter," I muttered once. "Your investment." They didn't hear me, or pretended not to. That's how it started. The measuring, the comparisons, the way Jasmine's drawings were hung on the fridge while mine disappeared. The way I was called responsible when I babysat but never bright. The way my name stopped appearing in conversations about the future. Jasmine was the light. I was the shadow she left behind. The shift in our family was like a slow rot. You don't see it at first. Then one day, the floor caves in. I just didn't know then how far it would fall. At 12, I started keeping count. How many times I washed dishes without being thanked. How many times Jasmine was called gifted in a single week. How many meals I skipped because I forgot to vacuum the stairs. By 13, I'd learned that silence was safer than protest. By 14, I could predict my father's mood from the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. Jasmine took her IQ test at 6. I still remember the laminated envelope and the way my father's eyes lit up when they saw the number. 151. "That's my DNA," he boomed, as if he'd just cloned Einstein. My mother clapped her hands. "She's a miracle." They cheered. And just like that, the world I lived in vanished. Tutors were hired. A strict schedule was set. Jasmine would wake at 6 a.m. for piano, then reading comprehension, then math enrichment. She had no time to clean her own room or feed the cat. That was now my job. "You'll handle the chores from now on," my mother said, handing me a long list taped to the refrigerator. "Think of it as supporting your sister's success." And I did. At first, I folded laundry while Jasmine practiced scales. I swept the front porch while she solved puzzles far above her grade. I wanted to help. I wanted to belong. But over time, the list grew longer. My name disappeared from birthday cakes. My report cards were ignored. And the girl who once clung to my leg during thunderstorms? She stopped waiting for me to walk her to school. One Friday night, I came home from school later than usual. I had stayed back to help clean up after the science fair. I thought they'd be proud, until I walked into the house. The living room was full of bags. Plastic ones. Luggage. A box with my name on it in thick red marker. "What's this?" I asked. My father sat on the arm of the couch, eating peanuts. My mother stood with her arms crossed. "You're 15 now," she said like it was a curse. "We've decided. Jasmine needs more space, more focus. She's applying to the gifted boarding academy next year, and we can't have chaos in the house." "I'm not chaos," I whispered. My father scoffed. "You're not helpful either. Unless you can contribute financially, there's no room for you here." He tossed an envelope at my feet. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a mock rental agreement in my name. $1,200 per month. A joke. A cruel, calculated joke. "I'm in high school," I said. "I don't even have a job." "Then you can't stay." They drove me to the train station that night. Didn't even walk me to the platform. As the car pulled away, my mother rolled down the window and called out, "Try your uncle. He's used to living with disappointments." It was dark, colder than Savannah had a right to be in spring. I had a backpack with one change of clothes, a water bottle, and $17 in singles and coins. I bought a ticket and waited, heart pounding in my throat, for the next train to Portland. 3 transfers, 7 hours, no sleep. I arrived at Uncle Theo's building just after dawn. The door opened before I even knocked. His eyes scanned my face, tired, puffy, streaked with dried tears, and I saw something shift in them. Not surprise, not pity, anger. "What did they do?" he asked, his voice low and shaking. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. Just sobs. Loud, broken sobs that filled the hallway. He pulled me inside and wrapped a blanket around me. His tiny apartment smelled like old books and cinnamon toast. "I'm so sorry," I cried. "For what?" he asked, guiding me to the couch. "For being too much. Or not enough. I don't even know anymore." He knelt beside me, took my hand. "I might not have much, Louisa," he said softly, "but if you'll let me, I want to be your parent." I looked at him, really looked. His thin frame, his tired eyes, his hands, rough with calluses from working odd jobs. He didn't offer comfort. He offered commitment. And for the first time in my life, I said yes. That night, I slept in a borrowed t-shirt, under a patched quilt that smelled faintly of mint. The quiet in Theo's home wasn't heavy. It was healing. There were no framed awards on the walls. No piano keys being pressed in the next room. Only peace, and the steady sound of a man who had every reason to give up, choosing instead to show up. We didn't have much. The apartment Uncle Theo lived in had peeling paint near the window frames and radiators that clanked like angry ghosts in winter. The kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people to stand in. But that place, that quiet little second-floor walk-up with its creaky floorboards and second-hand curtains, was the first place that ever felt like home. We lived simply. He worked part-time restoring antique furniture at a dusty little shop down the block. I helped on weekends, dusting, polishing brass handles, sometimes just sitting nearby with homework while he mended a drawer like it was a living thing. At school, I told no one the truth, just that I'd moved in with my uncle for family reasons. But the difference showed. I stopped jumping when someone raised their voice. I stopped waiting for people to ask me about Jasmine. I started sleeping without waking up in the middle of the night. Theo didn't have children of his own, but you wouldn't know it from the way he remembered every little thing. My math test dates, the way I liked my grilled cheese extra crispy, how I hated the feeling of wet socks. Every evening he'd ask, "How was your day?" and actually wait for an answer. Not with judgment, not with distraction, just quiet presence. He never called me a failure. He never asked me to be anyone else. He simply said, over and over, "You're doing great, Lou," even when I wasn't. When I turned 17, he handed me a birthday card with a single sentence. "I'm proud of the person you are, not just the things you do." I kept that card in my backpack for years. It lived longer than any other possession I had. Money was always tight, but Theo made things work. He taught me how to stretch rice and beans, how to patch my own socks, how to make soup from nothing but bones and memory. And he never took a cent from me, not even when I started earning. After school, I worked shifts at a library, then a local cafe. I saved everything, not because he asked, but because I knew one day I'd need to give him back something more than thank yous. By the time I turned 19, I had enough for community college. He cried when I got in. Not big sobs, just quiet tears behind glasses that fogged up too fast. "Your parents would have said it wasn't good enough," I told him. He shook his head. "But I'm not your parents, am I?" 2 years later, I graduated with honors in environmental science. Then came a full scholarship to a university in Oregon. Theo came to the ceremony in an old brown suit and borrowed shoes. He clapped the loudest. We took a photo, just the 2 of us, me in cap and gown, him holding a paper cup of juice and smiling like the sun had cracked open just for us. It's the only graduation picture I keep framed. Life moved. I moved with it. I got a job at a conservation center in the Pacific Northwest, working with reforestation projects and urban wildlife teams. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered, and it was mine. I married a man who didn't ask me to shrink. We had 2 children, both curious and kind, and Theo became Grandpa Theo without hesitation. He carved wooden toys for them, read books in funny voices, taught them how to tie knots and compost banana peels. Sometimes I'd catch him watching them from across the room, hands folded, eyes wet. I never asked what he was thinking. I already knew. We offered to move him in after the second baby was born. At first, he refused, said he didn't want to be a burden. But one evening, as the baby wailed and my husband burned dinner, and I sat on the kitchen floor, laughing in exhausted defeat, Theo stood in the doorway, watching. Then he said simply, "All right, I'll stay." So here we are, a family made not by blood, but by choice. No trust funds, no IQ trophies, no laminated awards, just a small house near a field of evergreens, a kitchen that always smells like cinnamon and roasted coffee, a backyard garden where my daughter once buried a jelly bean and cried when it didn't grow, and a man, thin, gray-haired, still coughing sometimes, who held me when no one else did, and never let go. It started with a letter, a real one, stamped, written in Jasmine's handwriting, the same tight, slanted cursive from when we were kids, though a little shakier now. I recognized it immediately. Inside was just one page, no return address, no pleasantries, just, "Are you happy?" And then, because I'm not, I can't breathe in this house anymore. My hands trembled as I read, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. Jasmine had become everything our parents ever wanted, a lawyer with multiple degrees, a spotless record, and a reputation as the girl with the mind of a machine. But reading her words, it was clear the machine was breaking. She wrote that her father still monitored her spending, that her mother visited her apartment unannounced, that her dating life was picked apart like a resume. "You're too emotional," they told her. "You're slipping," they said after a single bad week at work. She signed the letter. "Your sister, still, I hope." I showed the letter to Theo. He read it in silence, then nodded slowly. "I knew they'd crush her," he said. "They always crush what they try to own." We wrote back in secret. We arranged to meet her one Sunday afternoon at a bookstore outside Savannah, neutral ground. She wore a blazer and sunglasses, looked thinner than I remembered, still beautiful, still sharp, but something in her shoulders had folded. When she saw me, she dropped the mask, hugged me like she was 7 again, hiding behind my back from thunder. "I've been watching your life," she said softly. "Online mostly. Quietly. You look real. I want that. Not the titles. Not the applause. Just air." We met every few weeks after that. Quiet cafes. Parks. Phone calls at midnight when she was sure our parents were asleep. I never pushed her. I never said, "I told you so." I just listened, because I knew exactly what it felt like to live on someone else's stage and forget you ever had a voice. It took her 3 years to leave. She waited until her student loans were gone, until her lease was up, until the last family wedding was over, so she wouldn't have to explain herself to judgmental aunts and passive-aggressive cousins. She left a note on the kitchen counter of our parents' house. "I'm not your project. I'm not your investment. I'm done." Then she got on a plane and flew to me. She arrived in Portland with 2 suitcases and a single suitcase of guilt. For leaving them. For becoming like me. For not saying goodbye to Mother properly. I didn't try to take the guilt away, but I gave her space to unpack it. She stayed in our guest room for months. Got a job at a nonprofit doing policy work. Took language classes at night, and every weekend, she helped Theo in the garden, asking him what each plant meant. He started calling her kiddo. She started smiling again. One evening after dinner, she sat beside me on the porch and said, "You know, I'm not sure I even want to be a lawyer anymore." I looked over, surprised. "You're brilliant at it." I was brilliant because I had to be," she said, "not because I loved it." I waited, let her sit in the silence. Then she said, "Maybe I want to open a flower shop." I laughed. "You with allergies." She grinned. "I'll wear gloves." We both laughed until we cried. Watching her rediscover joy felt like watching spring arrive in slow motion. Not an explosion of color, just one green shoot at a time. Theo adored her. The kids adored her. And for the first time in her life, Jasmine adored herself, even without applause. Then, one day, a letter came. A real one. From Gwen and Raymond. The handwriting was still the same. Bold. Controlling. Full of old perfume and heavier expectations. They were coming. They wanted to talk. They wanted to reconnect. They said they had things to sort out. Theo read the letter out loud in the kitchen. Jasmine stood with her arms crossed. I sat beside the stove, hands tightening around a mug of tea gone cold. Well, I said finally, let them come. Jasmine looked up. You sure? I nodded. They'll come expecting something. And what will they get? She asked. I stared out the window, toward the garden where Theo had just planted sweet peas. Closure, I said. Ours, not theirs. They arrived on a Monday. Unannounced, of course. I was on the porch, helping Theo untangle garden wire, when I saw them coming up the path, slow, deliberate steps like they still believed the world owed them space. Raymond looked thinner than I remembered. His shoulders sloped. His hairline had surrendered long ago. Gwen wore a beige coat with buttons done all the way up, even though it was warm out. She carried a tote bag, probably full of guilt, or worse, expectations. I stood up and wiped my hands on my jeans. Theo took one look and muttered, I'll make tea for us. Then he disappeared inside. Louisa, my mother said first. Her voice was softer, but it wasn't kindness. It was calculation. My father gave a half smile. You've done well. We're happy to see that. I said nothing. We thought it was time to put the past behind us, he continued. Reconnect. Be a family again. I tilted my head. A family. He nodded. Yes. It's been long enough, don't you think? I stepped forward, just enough for them to notice how much taller I stood now. And which part do you want to forget first? The eviction, the fake lease, or the part where you threw me away because I couldn't pay to exist in your house? Raymond's smile faltered. Gwen cleared her throat. Jasmine is gone. My heart didn't skip. I knew what they meant. She left us, Gwen added, voice sharpening. She says she's living here with you. Is that true? She's here, I said evenly. She's safe. You brainwashed her, my father snapped. No, I replied. You broke her. I just showed her how to breathe. There was a pause, the kind that grows teeth. Then Gwen spoke again. We've had some setbacks. Financial. The company's gone under. The house sold. And Jasmine's not answering. And I asked. Raymond looked directly at me, like this was some boardroom negotiation. We need help. I blinked. Help. Yes. We're your parents. No, I said. You're strangers. Strangers who share my blood, but none of my history. My mother scoffed. We raised you until 15. I laughed sharp dry. You tolerated me until Jasmine's IQ test. After that, I was just extra weight. Raymond stepped forward. Don't be so dramatic. You're right, I said. Let me simplify it. I stepped between them and the door. You don't live here. You don't get to step into this home and pretend there was never damage done. Gwen's face twisted. You're really going to leave your parents out on the street? I'm not leaving anyone, I said. You left me. I just never invited you back. They didn't move, so I did. I pushed the door open just enough for them to see inside. Pictures on the wall. Kids' drawings taped to the fridge. Theo's slippers by the stairs. See that? I said, voice low. That's a real family. One built on kindness, not performance. One that doesn't throw people away for being inconvenient. Raymond's face turned a pale, fleshy shade of red. We're not asking for much. You're asking for everything, I said. Again. He stepped forward too quickly. His hand gripped my shoulder tight. I didn't flinch. Let go, I said calmly. Why are you so angry? he hissed. You've won. Can't you just let us back in? You never left, I said. You've been inside my ribs for 2 decades, but not anymore. He didn't move, so I stepped closer, lowered my voice. Tell me something, Dad, I whispered. How does it feel to be abandoned by the daughter you once discarded? He let go. His hand dropped like it was burned. Gwen looked ready to cry. Maybe she finally realized that crocodile tears don't water dead roots. I took one final breath. Then I asked, not aloud, not to them, but inside the quietest part of me, was I cruel today? Or just no longer available to be hurt? The wind picked up. Jasmine opened the door behind me, eyes wide but calm. I nodded to her, then to them. Goodbye, I said, and I closed the door. This time it stayed closed. I didn't watch them leave, didn't peer through the curtains or wait for the sound of gravel under tires. I just stood there, one hand on the doorknob, the other on my chest, like I needed to hold something in place. Theo came into the hallway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. They gone? I nodded. For good this time. He studied me for a long moment. You okay? I wanted to say yes, but instead I said I don't know. But I'm free. That night the house was quiet. Jasmine was upstairs, reading to the kids. My husband was folding laundry, humming off-key. Theo had gone to bed early, said the visit reminded him too much of the old days, and not in a good way. I sat on the back porch, a blanket wrapped around my legs, tea cooling in my hands. I thought about the look on my mother's face, the way my father's voice cracked, not with sorrow, but with disbelief, as if he couldn't fathom that I had grown into someone who didn't need him. Maybe I hadn't grown. Maybe I had simply returned to the girl I was always meant to be, the one they couldn't see, the one they couldn't break. The next morning, Jasmine joined me by the garden. She was in her pajamas, hair uncombed, mug in hand. I can't believe you said that to him, she whispered, eyes wide with admiration. The part about being discarded. I shrugged. It's just the truth. She took a sip. Still, I don't know if I could have stood that steady. You don't have to, I told her. That's why I did. She smiled, and for a moment we were kids again, before the scorekeeping, before the tests, before the wedge our parents drove between us. I hope I find someone like you did, she murmured, eyes flicking toward the garden where my husband knelt beside Theo, helping him transplant a row of herbs. You will, I said, but first make sure you know who you are, so no one gets to decide for you again. She nodded, quiet, then added, I've decided I'm not going back to law. Not ever. I smiled. Good. I want to work with kids, she continued. Maybe teach. Maybe help other girls like us figure out they're allowed to want things for themselves. My throat tightened. Then do it, I whispered. Later that week, we finalized Theo's paperwork to join us permanently overseas. We'd been planning it for a while. New job, better climate, a place where the kids could grow up bilingual and barefoot. I walked him through the forms, line by line. He frowned at the long paragraphs, but never complained. You know, he said, pen poised, I never imagined I'd get to live somewhere that didn't feel temporary. I looked at him, this man who had once given me a couch and a blanket and a name to cling to. You're not a guest anymore, I said. You're home. He smiled. You always did have a way of making small spaces feel big. I touched his hand. That's because you did it first. On our last day before the move, I visited the old neighborhood one final time. Not to say goodbye, just to remember. The bakery where I used to press my nose to the glass. The cracked sidewalk I once tripped on while racing Jasmine home. The apartment Theo carried me into, shivering and 17, thinking I had nowhere left to go. Turns out that was the beginning, not the end. I left no forwarding address for my parents. Didn't leave a note. Didn't look back. They had taught me how to survive without love. But Theo taught me something better, how to thrive with it. Some nights, I still ask myself, was I wrong to shut them out? Was I cruel, ungrateful, cold? And then I look at my children, at my sister, planting seeds she'll finally let grow, at Theo, dancing awkwardly to jazz in the kitchen while holding a grandchild in one arm and a whisk in the other. And I know I made the right choice. They threw water at me and called it discipline. I built a home and called it peace. They gave me nothing. I gave myself everything. And maybe, just maybe, that's the sweetest revenge of all.